Thanks for having us.
Hello, hello world. Welcome to, we're doing a beautiful video today. We are with Benchmark Wines, and what we are here to talk about today, we are representing the Russian River Valley wine growers, and we have three panelists. And what we're doing today is discussing not only three beautiful Pinot Noirs, but we're meeting three people that represent them. And we're talking about them in the structure of neighborhoods, and neighborhoods are different from sub-AVAs in a number of ways. One, they don't want to be sub-AVAs. They want to be part of the Russian River Valley where they are, but there are huge differences. And that's not just marketing. That's not somebody's opinion. It's not subjective, it's objective, and there's science behind it. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So welcome to Benchmark Wine Group. We are so excited to have you today. I am Jodi Bronchtien. I'm an advanced sommelier at the Court of Master Sommeliers, and I most recently worked at Press in Napa Valley, and Benchmark is kind of one of my, it's my home in terms of doing videos. And I am in Nashville now, working for Sean Brock. I'm the wine director of Audrey, and I signed on for this before I moved, and I have held on to it because I'm so excited. It's harvest right now. Harvest is getting ready to start, and we have three people that are going to talk about harvest and wines and the neighborhoods. And so we have here today, and I'll do it in order. So we're going to talk about the Eastern Hills neighborhood, and we are with Greg LaFollette, and he is from Ancient Oak Cellars. And then next is going to be Nancy Bailey, and she is the general manager with Gary Farrell, and that is the Green Valley neighborhood and the only separate AVA that's in there. And then we're going to do Alex Kanzler, and he is in Sebastopol Hills, and he's with Kandler Family Vineyards, and they are a family-run winery. Welcome, everybody. We're so excited to have you. Really glad to be here. I'm especially glad to be part of this in rainy Nashville, where I can smell the sunshine and these beautiful wines. So we're going to talk real quick about Russian River Valley wine growers and why we're here today. And specifically within the context of neighborhoods. So people are familiar with Napa and sub-AVAs, right? Napa Valley, AVAs. You're in Sonoma, but you're Russian River. So you don't want different AVAs. There's 6 neighborhoods, and I know that a couple of you have worked on this for a long time, and I would like to sort of turn it over. Greg, can you kind of talk about that benchmark study that came out in 2015? I know that for 20 years before that, there was a study done to try to figure out what the commonalities were in Russian River Valley, and it found that there really weren't any. And initially people were super disappointed. And then the study came out in 2015, and it showed that that's a good thing because there are major differences, but it's still the same AVA. Can you talk about that study a little bit? I know that Alex knows a lot as well, but if you can give us sort of an overview, Greg, for the people watching, I think that would be really helpful from your viewpoint.
Yeah, well, many years ago, about 20 years or longer, a group of us got together and actually put together what was called a Tragon stacking technique to try to get descriptors to describe different areas. And we did find that the Green Valley was separate statistically when you're using descriptors from the greater Russian River Valley. And that was kind of the beginning of it. There were a lot of really great people in on that. Mary Edwards, Rod Berglund, a lot of folks who were kind of legends now in the industry. But we weren't able to really take it any further until Roger Bolton came along, and we partnered with him for these 6 areas, first 5 and then the 6th, to have him do what's called principal component analysis of basic mineral compounds, and we got it coming up right here, on the different areas. And if we can focus in on those 5 little areas with different color codings, those were the first 5 areas. And what this represents, for those of you who study statistics and math, science in general, this PCA is nothing short of a thunderclap. Roger Bolton, Dr. Roger Bolton, is legendary in the industry, said that he had never seen something as clear and statistically significantly different among different groups as you see right here. And so what this is doing is it's taking principal components of the actual chemistry of the wine This is not flavor. It's not aroma. This is like having a birth certificate. This is like saying, I was born in Hawaii, or I was born in New York. And this birth certificate is an irrefutable evidence that this is where I was. That's kind of what this is doing right here.
Wow.
It's showing us that each one of these really has its own distinct fingerprint from a elemental chemical standpoint. And it's nothing short of a thunderclap. Having spent a lot of years doing research on various different things, to me, this was really astounding and very exciting.
It had to be such a feeling of like justification and reward. I mean, that period of time where you said when you started initially that Green Valley was different. And in fact, it has its own AVA. It's a sub AVA, but nothing else is. And to be like, okay, well, there is a difference. And I think more importantly, there's objectivity there. It's not what, like you said, it's not what you can smell or taste in the glass. These are actual elements in the soil. It makes them different. And something that I know people have lots of feelings about AVAs. And for those viewers that are watching that maybe are confused about what an AVA is, it's an American viticultural area. And you have to apply for it. And it is blood, sweat, and tears. I did a report on Rutherford AVA, and it read like a telenovela. It was heart-wrenching. Back then, Pritchard Hill was like, we feel like we're part of Rutherford. It was just, it's not a joke. It's people's livelihoods. People mean it. And so when you apply for an AVA, what you're supposed to do is distinguish why you need one, why it's different from the surrounding area. And that could be anything. It could be because it's an elevation requirement, like Howell Mountain, or it's an amphitheater shape right there that holds the cool air. And you're not doing that here. This neighborhood initiative is still saying, we're all Russian River Valley. We're just a different neighborhood in it. And I think that's wonderful because you really are sort of combining your resources. You're sort of all for one and one for all. It's not like, okay, Rutherford versus Oakville. It's, hey, we've got some differences here, but we're still overarching Russian River Valley and we're kind of in it together. And I think that's wonderful. And everyone I've talked to in the series has worked on it or knows people, and it goes back. It's not brand new. It's not marketing. This is like decades to get to this point. So
yeah, if I could jump in here, Jodi, I think what you ended with right there is really the key. This wasn't and isn't a marketing initiative. This wasn't, something that somebody dreamed up in Russian River Valley wine growers in order to differentiate us. This really started with the growers and the winemakers, dedicated and interested in their individual sites and the wines that were crafted off of those sites. And even the names of the neighborhoods, Sebastopol Hills, Santa Rosa Plains, Green Valley being the exception as an actual AVA, Middle Reach in particular. Yeah. These were names that have been used amongst the winemakers and the grape growers for years now. And, I could call a buddy and say, hey, I'm looking for some Pinot Noir. Do you know any for sale? And a totally relevant response would be like, yeah, what neighborhood are you interested in? Or, well, I know something in Middle Reach or Laguna Hills. I don't know anything in Sebastopol Hills. Like, are you interested in those? So kind of just building off of that foundation and taking it out to the consumer and the critic world is just kind of an extension of what we're doing already. And that's why I think it ends up, really resonating with people, because it's just an extension of how we're growing grapes and making wine to begin with.
And that's, I did make a promise on the last seminar. This is part 2. And my promise was that I'm starting a wine list in Nashville, and that I'm going to put these wines on my wine list under the neighborhoods, so that I want to be the first wine list in the country to do it, because I can explain it, and I sure will. I'll take 20 minutes.
So now let me put on the marketing hat. And what I've always said to people, within like the organization, Russian River Valley Wine Growers, which is a marketing organization, is it's so frustrating when you go to a restaurant, even, right down the road in San Francisco, which is like our, main city here in Northern California. And the Russian River Valley, Pinot Noir list in the big fat wine book is, 1 page, and the Burgundy list is like 18 pages, and they need to have 10, 12, 15 wines from every village in Burgundy to feel like they're covering Burgundy. And then they have 10 or 12 and 15 wines to cover all of Russian River Valley. We're like, no, we want those 10, 12, 15 wines per neighborhood. So you're really onto something there.
And also I have something that brings up the title of Grand Cru when you talk about Burgundy. And I definitely want to talk to Nancy about that when it's your turn. I know we talked about it a little bit earlier. Okay, so Greg, let's talk about your wine. Let's talk about, can you tell us about Ancient Oak Cellars? And real quick, can you tell us where you're sitting? Because we are going to be drinking today, the 2017 Ancient Oak Cellars, 2017 Siebert Ranch Pinot Noir. And can you tell everybody where you are right now?
I'm at the Siebert Ranch right now. We're in a little oak grove just outside, just off to my left are the vines. This particular vineyard, it was planted first. Ken and Melissa Maholt Siebert are the proprietors of Ancient Oak Cellars, and Ken's grandfather planted this vineyard. So it's been around for a little while and had some real oomph to it. The Eastern Hills it's probably the warmest region of the 6 neighborhoods. It has the least amount of fog influence. And another important thing is that it is probably the most diverse from a soil standpoint. It's up along the hills, so there's a lot of eroded areas. There's a lot of parent material that's been uncovered. There's so many different aspects that even just planting on one side versus another it really can make a difference. And the wine that we're tasting here is from the upper part, the highest elevation of the vineyard. And it looks out west over the entire valley. It's a beautiful scene. It does get those cool breezes in the afternoon, but during the daytime, it can get quite warm. And it is among the first to be picked. And during the 2017 fires, this particular vineyard and the whole property was destroyed. So Ken and Melissa have had to replant it. So the wine that you're tasting now is actually kind of a viticultural heritage treasure that Ken's grandfather planted, but now they've replanted to some of the same clone, historic Pomard clone, but they've also planted a bunch of newer clones that have just come in recently. And if you're talking about how the Russian River is founded on these small family farmers, well, these guys are living the life. These are small family farmers. They do their own farming. Ken is the farmer. I'm the winemaker, and Melissa actually kind of runs everything. And this is kind of the benchmark, if you pardon my expression. Of,
hey, we can use benchmark 17 more times in this.
Okay, if you want a reference point for what Russian River Pinot Noir can be like from the Eastern Hills, this is your reference point right here. Made by 17 acres. They live on the property. They know every clod of dirt. They planted all the vines themselves. You can't get any more family, hands-on oriented than that. And the wine also shows it as well. It's a little bit warmer and a little bit earthy, but it doesn't quite have the same nuances that you find in some of the other Russian rivers. It gets warmer a little bit early, and so it has a lot of a warm presentation with a little bit stronger tannins. It's rather forceful and has really great color almost all the time.
Mm-hmm. So you are the northernmost. When we were showing the map, you were in yellow, and you were the northeastern most neighborhood, and you're right against the Mayacamas, correct?
Yes, so we get a lot of afternoon sun, and as opposed to being on the other side of the Russian River in the southwest, which is great to have Alex here because he'll talk about the coolest region. So we're all the way opposite from each other in the Russian River Valley. You can't get more defining influence than that. And then, of course, with Nancy's going to talk about what's closer to the middle. But it's a great comparison.
Oh, and not only that, I like what Alex said about how if you're trying to buy fruit, how it's just, that's what people talk about. They talk about neighborhoods, and it's new to the consumer. It's new to us, but not to you. Like that's just how you deal with things. That's how you talk. And I think that's kind of dynamite, especially like when there's a cooler vintage. Where would you want to buy fruit from? Well, that would be Eastern Hills. You're going to get some ripeness there, right? Which is what you want. Okay, yeah. So you've been, so when you said that already, that the Eastern Hills, it affects wine differently because there's more tannin. Yep. You get ripeness. You pick a little bit earlier, right? Yes. I want to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, and it's Telechef, who is One of my wine heroes. Like,
Yeah. So Andre, in fact, before we got on this video, Mark Telechef, his nephew, just gave me a call, and he wanted to say hi to everyone. And Andre was the single biggest guiding influence of my career. He was a really great guy. And
good.
yeah. And there's one thing in particular that he taught me that a lot of people in the industry don't do, and that is lees sampling. So one of the things he gifted me was an antique lees sampler, which is a really long pipette with a bead and a little bead of glass in the bottom. You push it all the way to the bottom of the barrel, and you lift that bead up, and you can collect all the glop, all the yeast sediment that falls to the bottom, called lees. And then you pull that up and you sample that. And that's one of the things that Andre was fairly big on, that he and I worked on together. And that's important, not just for Chardonnay, because a lot of people keep the Chardonnay lees on, but also lees in Pinot Noir. And if you get reductive characters or unusual characters that occur in the bottom of the barrel and you're only sampling from the top, you are not going to see what's going on in the bottom. And by the same token, if the wine itself is kind of a bit off, the French would have a saying that the lees can help to cure the wine. And the worst thing you can do is rack the wine off the lees. So you have to sample those lees and make sure that they're good. And that's probably one of the biggest things that Andre taught me, and that most winemakers in California still do not do.
Wow. Okay. So for our audience, well, you talked a little bit about what lees are. Lees are dead yeast cells. And why would you keep your wine on them? Well, you would keep your wine on dead yeast cells for a number of reasons: to add texture, to add mouthfeel, to add richness without imparting any oak flavors. And Andre Telechef did a number of things. He He was a Russian man, and he was like in his late 30s or 40s, and came to California, and he was working for BV. Like, they went and got him and said, "I want your finest young French wine student." They said, "It's a middle-aged Russian guy." And they said, "We'll take him." Came back to California and did things like, "Hey guys, maybe not redwood barrels. How about we try some French oak?" And also, super important, let's clean this winery, because all this weird off-putting flavors you have, all the Brettanomyces here, is because you're not cleaning anything. And also malolactic fermentation, which is where malic acid, which is in a Granny Smith apple, that tart, crisp, bright acid, changes over to lactic acid, which is like milk acid, a little bit softer, rounder, creamier. Almost all red wine goes through malolactic fermentation. It does. And you can use it as a tool with white. And he said, malolactic fermentation is your friend. It's not a mystery. Like, let's get involved, but let's clean the winery and get some new barrels in here. And he's like this hero. He set up California for the spike, you know, he really
And
did.
the world. He, for instance, the greatest Merlot vineyard in the world, Ornellaia, arguably, is a vineyard that he set up all over the world. And if anyone wants to see his movie that's out right now that Mark Telechef made, it's a beautiful film. You just look up Andre, the Voice of Wine, and you can view the movie. It's you pay per view. So
perfect. Thank you. I'll be doing that tonight with this wine. So thank you for that. And then how's harvest going?
Boy, I'm bottling this week, and I'm finishing Friday, probably around 7 p.m. And I leave my house at 4:30 on the morning Saturday, loaded up with bins, and I'm picking. So I just have a very few hours between bottling and picking. It's crazy. It's madcap.
Well, thank you for spending it with us. I'm sure this was not the most opportune time, but it is for us because we get to see like a vineyard right now, and it's making my heart really happy. And I'm sure that there's somebody in New York right now watching that's also really happy. So we appreciate that. The wine is delicious. So what we have here is, like I said before, just so you can see it, Ancient Oak Cellars Pinot Noir. It's the 2017. It's the Siebert Ranch Pinot Noir, and he's representing the Eastern Hills. Greg, thank you so much for this. This is like, I took a sip of it. If you notice, I don't drink a lot of the wine. I took a sip of it and I've left it. And the finish on this is extraordinary. It's endless. And I see what you mean about tannin. It's not aggressive tannin. It's tannin that is like, it's a punctuation here. It literally, you've got all this bright, gorgeous fruit, and then the tannin is just like, it's leading the finish. It's beautiful. And I want food with this desperately. I want pork loin immediately.
Thank you.
Of course, of course. Okay, so let's see, as that was first. Thank you for your background as well. And I know that we're gonna talk to Alex about this some more, but the Andre Telechef thing, I fangirled so hard when I read that. I was like, that's gotta be a headline in here. Like, I love that whole history. Like you were talking about the family history of ancient oaks, but also like to have that. And I've never heard about Lee's testing. And of course that makes sense, especially if there's reduction underneath it. And sorry if we're getting out of the depth of viewers, but very sexy stuff, very important. All you need to know is that it's delicious, but there are reasons why.
Come taste with us.
Yeah, see, exactly. Okay, so we are gonna move to Green Valley, and if, so this is Nancy Bailey, she's a general manager of Gary Farrell, and you've been there for 10 years, is that correct?
That is correct. I've been here twice. I worked with Gary Farrell, our founder, our original winemaker, and then he left and I left, but this place has always had a special place in my heart. Gary was one of the early pioneers of Russian River Pinot, started making wine back in the 1970s and was the winemaker at Davis Bynum, which was an incubator of sorts where crazy people who thought that Sonoma County could produce world-class wines were making a little bit of this and a little bit of that. He met Joe Rocchioli Jr., who was just up the road. Joe said, "Hey, I'd like you to teach my son how to be a winemaker," and he paid him in grapes. Gary made his first 55 cases of a 1982 called a Russian River Selection Pinot Noir, but it was actually Rocchioli Vineyard fruit. And that launched us, that was 39 years ago. So you mentioned the Grand Cru. We consider ourselves a negociant of the Grand Cru vineyards because we work with 36 of the very best vineyards in the Russian River predominantly, but also beyond. It includes Rocchioli, Ellen, Bacigalupi, Ritchie, but also Durrell and Gaps Crown and Fort Ross Seaview and Sanford and Benedict and La Rinconada. So we get our own rows and our own blocks farmed to our specifications. And it's like having 36 little mini estate vineyards. It's a pretty sweet place to be.
And also like every one of those names, like fired off synapses in my head, like, ooh, I don't even know which one I like best out of all those.
Well, you don't have to like anyone best. You can have them all. That's the beautiful thing.
It's a very sexy list of things.
It is a sexy list. It is a sexy list. And of course, today I'm being the fangirl for Green Valley, which you pointed out earlier is actually an official sub-AVA of the Russian River. So we're a neighborhood and a sub-AVA because back when the Russian River was formed in 1983, they automatically recognized that Green Valley was pretty gosh darn cool. Now we're not as cool as we used to be because Sebastopol Hills is cooler than us now, but it's definitely, and you'll get to hear Alex talk about that. But it is definitely defined by the marine influence and also this particular vineyard by the Laguna de Santa Rosa. I have to point out before I get off on fog, I don't know whether you can see this.
Oh, wait, hold on. Wait. We just put a map up. I'm sorry. Well, let's look real quick. So Green Valley is green.
We're the Green Valley in green.
Okay. Now, if we could take the map down, thanks so much.
Sorry, I was
Gold Ridge soil.
This is Gold Ridge soil. It looks like the sand from the beach. It's the dominant soil series here.
Can you talk about it?
Yeah, it's super well draining because it's sand, and it doesn't have very high fertility. So basically, the vines are focused in on what it is that they need to do, which is make lovely fruit and not so many bushy canes and leaves. So the Green Valley is also defined, obviously, as I mentioned, by fog and coolness. I live in Sebastopol, which is very close to the Hallberg Vineyard. And I can personally attest that the fog comes in every night in the late afternoon and does not burn off until about 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. And as a result, this area is kind of giving you a lot of complexity in the wines with a yin and yang. You have a concentration of fruit aromas but with a backdrop of earthiness, sort of mushroom, tobacco qualities to it.
Yeah.
The wines are very succulent from the Green Valley, and I think the Hallberg Vineyard Pinot that you're tasting from Gary Farrell shows this. It's got a combination of dark fruits. So you've got the dark cherry, but you've also got blueberry, huckleberry, kind of brambleberry in there. And it's also got red fruits, but as opposed to the bright red cherry, you're kind of more in the cranberry pomegranate
Yes,
end
exactly.
of the spectrum. You're also getting spice, which I love about the cool climate signature from this particular neighborhood. And just so you know, I don't have a particular favorite neighborhood. We source from 5 of the 6 at Gary Farrell. But the spice component is baking spice. But again, mushrooms, earthiness, a little tobacco comes into play. Another thing about the Green Valley is there's sort of a silky texture, like a gentle, soft mouthfeel, but it's contrasted with that sort of bright, zesty acidity, which we get especially in the wine that you're drinking, because we pick a little earlier on the ripeness spectrum. So this particular site, Hallberg Vineyard, is immaculately farmed by one of the icons of Sonoma County, Kirk Locke. Yes, there he goes.
This is what we're drinking.
Oh,
right
you
now.
have the Dijon clone. So, okay.
Yes.
So there's a really similar temperatures from day to night, not a huge swing from one direction to the other.
Okay.
So the vines never really shut down, but it's super cool. So you're also getting kind of again, that more development of spice. It's a blend, the Dijon clones of 667 and 777. The vineyard is, yes, go ahead.
I have a question for you about that.
Okay.
So this is what it says on the website. It says that that you use clone 667, 777, which is a personal favorite, 828 Pomard, and I put this in quotes, and a mysterious suitcase selection. You come on, tell the people what we want to know. Is this
well a suitcase selection? Basically means somebody took a clipping from the vineyard at night and brought it out in their suitcase or their sock, as the case may be. But nobody is admitting to where this particular thing came from. It just
what's the rumor?
Tell out of
Nancy.
there. I don't know, and I would have to fight Kirk Locke, and he's a pretty big guy, so I'm not going there. But we love it. We love it.
Yes.
So the cool thing about this vineyard is it's dry farmed and has been for a long time. So the vine roots go down about 15 feet. And as a result, thankfully, in a year like this year, we're not seeing the vines affected really.
Okay, if I can just speak to dry farming really quickly. Dry farming is just what it sounds like. It's you have to think back. Like there's so many old there are old vine places. There's old vines in the Anderson Valley and Mendocino that are up on the hill, and it's, no one grows them anymore. And people are like, well, now that it's sexy to say something's like old and dry farmed. But back then, like when you think about dry farming, now it's important. But back then, like maybe you didn't have running water. It was the 40s. Like, what are you going to take your water from the well and water the vines? You planted when you thought there would be rain. And in California, that's a very specific time up in NorCal, up where you are. And it made it or it didn't. And that was it. A lot of people, it's very sexy now, but a lot of that stuff was based on just limited resources. And so they don't see any water. They are not given any additional water. That's what that means. I know Frog's Leap in Napa, never. That's just, it makes it or it doesn't. And those vines go down 40 feet. Grapevines are scary geniuses, and they will get what they want. And young vines are thirsty, and they will search and search and search. And it's not pejorative when things are irrigated. Sometimes it has to be. It just has to be. It's not saying, oh, well, if you irrigate, it's not as good of a product, or you're not a better steward of the things. That's not what it is at all. It's just, gosh, if it can happen, then that's high five. Like, that's wonderful if that could happen, especially in the climate, the way things are. The other day, somebody had the water running here, and I ran downstairs and I was like, what is going on? They're we're like, I mean, it rains here every day. And I said, my California is up. I have like having an anxiety attack listening to this water run. Like you're all the water in the world. California needs this right now. Turn that off. But so dry farmed they're kind of just regulating themselves essentially. So that's wonderful. If it can happen, that's very sexy. It can't, it's not possible. It is impossible to do that everywhere. So it's not a value judgment at all. It's just cool when it can happen, right?
Right.
So you've been there 10 years and you've been there twice. So in your 10 years, you say that you source from 5 neighborhoods. You've got all these like 36 vineyards, all like Oscar winning award, like beautiful. Like you see all those things on a wine list and very sexy. Has the winemaking philosophy changed in your 10 years? Any insights to that?
Yeah, no, I have the answer for you. So I was lucky enough to bring on board our current winemaker, director of Teresa Heredia, in May of 2012. Our house style is still elegant, balanced, restrained with great natural acidity. When I brought her on, she had been the winemaker at Joseph Phelps Freestone property on the Sonoma Coast for 10 years. She'd worked with 100 acres of state fruit. She'd had the University of Phelps, all the resources, worked to harvest at Domaine de Monte. Very smart girl, was getting her PhD in chemistry at UC Davis before she fell in love with the wine program and transferred. But I knew that she was going to come in and very thoughtfully analyze what we were doing and not just simply rip everything up and try to start again. When you're an old established winery brand like we are, you don't just recreate a new style. But she was very thoughtful. So she's made these little line changes to what we're doing. So we're picking slightly earlier on the ripeness spectrum that we were to capture that fresh, bright, natural acidity. We added some things based on her background in chemistry. So we're doing cold soak for about 3 to 5 days and extended maceration for 7 to 10, which is not something that Gary himself did. Reason being is Teresa's like trying to capture as much of the site as possible. And she said there's so many qualities, aromas and flavors that are present in the skins and the seeds pre and post fermentation that she's trying to get everything in there. We've kind of gone from a very fruit forward to a succulent and savory component. So she introduced whole cluster, which is not something that Gary used to do. In fact, the wine that you have is about 20% whole cluster because Green Valley really lends itself to that possibility there. We're using also light toast. Gary used medium toast. And we're using a lot of boutique coopers that she fell in love with when she was at Freestone. So there have been micro changes. If you bring our wines out to people who knew Gary Farrell wines before, they'll be like, oh, I've always loved Gary Farrell. But she basically deconstructed in a very clever, thoughtful, measured way what we were doing and got to the end result in a slightly different manner. The wines, I think, have a lot more textural richness and definitely we're still elegant and balanced, but we've got that succulent, savory thing going on.
And if you're listening and you don't know what whole cluster or extended maceration are, they are ways, like she explained it, of keeping the skins and the stems, in the case of whole cluster, keeping them on the wine because they add character. And it's like, this is the most simplistic thing I can think of. It's the difference between French fries and when you actually like cut a potato and you actually eat the skin. There's a depth of character. And this is not the same thing at all. This is for like, if your kids are listening, what it does is it adds something. So why take that part away? And in the sense of Pinot Noir, when you have whole cluster and you have the stems, when you see winemakers tasting grapes or crews tasting grapes, they spit them out and they look at the seeds, right? And so what are they looking for? And I could be wrong. You guys stop me. I've got experts in the room. They're looking for color. You want lignification. You want brown seeds. You want brown stems because that means that they are phenolically ripe. They're getting to phenolic ripeness. And what's that? That's the difference between a banana that's just turned yellow and a green banana. You don't want to make wine from a green banana. It's going to be bitter and tart and take all the fruit out of your mouth. You want a little more ripeness in there, and it affects it. And it's, I don't know if people realize that, you know, all you see is this beautiful wine and you see like it's very sexy bottling and we get to have all this great talk, but there's like, winemaking is fraught with 1 million decisions that are massively important, and you've got hours to make them, and it's your whole year. And there are things you could do to sort of ameliorate bad decisions, but nothing better than just making the right decision. Am I wrong, everybody?
Right.
Okay.
One thing that I'd like to add on the whole cluster, which
Yeah.
goes back to the Green Valley neighborhood, is in cooler climates like the Green Valley, the skin, the grapes and the stems can basically come to ripeness together. And you can see this in certain clones like 828, where the stems are thinner and they're browned off. They look woody. And as opposed to the green stems of your like table grapes that you have at home, if you bite into one of those accidentally, you get those like green
Bitter
bell
tannin.
peppery flavors, which aren't attractive in a Pinot Noir. But the browned off, hardened twig-like woody stems that you get from the cooler climates brings a tea-like quality. So the extended maceration, Teresa always likes to talk about it as steeping. The extended maceration is she's basically steeping the skins and the seeds and the stems with the finished wine for an extended period of time to just kind of pull out some of those tea savory qualities.
That's a really good way to put it, honestly. Like, that's so visual and everybody knows what that looks and feels like, you know? So that's awesome. Can you tell us how harvest is going? What's happening?
Well, one of the reasons why I'm here and not Teresa is we've started harvest. And I kind of had a feeling that we were going to be off to an early start this year. So we got our first fruit in yesterday.
Yay!
We got in about 13 tons, which is quite a lot to start with. We got Star Ridge Pinot and Ritchie Vineyard Chardonnay. And we're off to the races. It's a little cooler today, so we don't have any fruit. But Teresa having to go out to all of those 36 vineyards to taste the fruit and make picking decisions. It is not a good time to ask a winemaker anything at all. It's like, you do you make the best wines you can, and I will hold down the fort. So here I am.
Got it. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for being here also, because of we're listening to all this. And when I saw you in a vineyard, I was like, oh gosh, we talk about harvest, but like, it's really happening for people. It's their whole lives. This is fun for me. It's not fun for everybody else. Right. Okay. Got it. Well, thank you so much. This wine is exactly what you say. There is like this there's a lot of complexity in here. I get the rich, ripe fruit, but really the cranberry pomegranate, but not in a harsh way. It's softened by the darker fruit, but there's a lot of things I could put with this as well. You know, it's a beautiful food wine. It's a beautiful contemplative sipping wine as well. So bright, richness, tartness, all at the same time. And that lends to a great experience both ways, just drinking it or pairing with food. So
thank you. I think the duck breast, but a mushroom risotto might be quite good too in your rainy climate.
Oh, rainy and humid.
Never mind.
We have I went to the store and there was a green and black muscadine grapes, and I took a picture for Instagram. I was like, I felt like I was in Wonderland. Anyway, but I grew up in the South, so it's not that crazy. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for talking about the Eastern Hills. Mr. Alex, tell us all the things. Can you talk about Kanzler Family Vineyard for a second, please? Because I don't know if anybody can see this. This is what we're drinking today. We're drinking the 2019 Russian River Valley Pinot Noir from Kanzler Family Vineyards. But if you can see this on the back, there are 4 signatures here, and they're all, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit. We have 2 founders. We have a winemaker, which is Alex, another winemaker that's here today. Thank you. Who also has, can we talk about it?
Oh yeah, of course.
We have a brand new, we're gonna have a new signature on this soon. We have a brand new 12-day-old baby, Kanzler. So congratulations and thanks for being here. I'm sure you're not sleep deprived at all.
Welcome not at all. We're just gearing up for harvest. Slid that baby in there right before the grapes started coming in. So I'd say we got like a C minus, B plus in our winemaker family planning. Usually try to have a baby in like the spring, but at least it's not 1 month from now.
Exactly. See, so like right in under the, right, exactly.
Right under the wire. And it's good that we work with, you know, comparatively later sites. I do not have any fruit coming in right now from Sebastopol Hills or Green Valley, and knock on wood, won't have any coming in for another couple of weeks here. So I got just a little bit of runway.
And why is that? Is that because Sebastopol Hills neighborhood is the coolest one? Can we talk about that?
It could play a role. Yeah, we got a bunch of stuff to talk about before.
You can pay me
jump in.
later.
Like,
You can pay me later.
yeah, before we jump into too much, like, I mean, as Nancy and Greg are talking, you know, it gets my mind spinning of, you know, certain associations that I have. And one thing that I want to dovetail off of Greg's comments was he was talking about leaf sampling that he learned from Andre Telechef. I learned leaf sampling from a mentor of mine named Ginny Lambrix, who was a protege of Greg's, who was a protege of Andre's. And so it's so cool how, you know, the wine industry is a rising tide lifts all boats type of things. There's not a lot of like proprietary stuff where it's like, oh, only I know how to do this and I'm not going to tell anybody else. Like, knowledge disseminates and skills disseminate and good ideas disseminate it. And that's really cool. So, you know, Andre's knowledge continues to filter down into younger generations. And then when Nancy mentioned Teresa Heredia and specifically her private experience at Joseph Phelps, the first internship I ever had was actually over in Sonoma Valley, but one of my intern colleagues was dating a girl who was an intern with Teresa over there in Freestone. And so that was like probably the second winery I ever visited from a production standpoint was out in Freestone, and Teresa gave us a tour of that. And that just jumps out in my mind because I was like 2.5 months into the wine industry formally and standing up at that vineyard, you know, it's like 5 miles from my family's estate here. That was the moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm bit. The bug's bit me. This is what I'm going to do. And it was at the very end of my first harvest in 2008. And it was my first time meeting Teresa and being out into the vineyard world a little bit. So anyway, it's a small industry, and we all know each other. And this is a super fun thing to do. You know, obviously it's great to do visits to wine country and meet us and interact with wine country in person. But, you know, being here on a Zoom call, I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us and, you know, getting a little taste of it here. And there's one silver lining of the pandemic. At least we can reach a little bit more people doing this way.
Exactly. And I think that there is, you know, these videos go on YouTube, and I just think about how much I'm on YouTube researching. I mean, as a sommelier constantly, and like, so it's not just about now. In fact, the now is like the least important part. It's people, hey, you know what? I'm looking for a different Pinot Noir, or, you know, I've heard about this vineyard, let me look it up. And then watching this later on, it's like a moment in time. And I'm super grateful for Zoom to be able to do this and to like literally look and see a vineyard right now. My eyes are desperate to look at grapevines. It was the worst part about leaving California. But you know, I can always come visit, and I'm the biggest fan. So
well, Nashville's a fun town, so I'm sure you're not getting bored.
You know what? I am building a wine program, and I have been almost nowhere. And today I got to taste some wines from Napa, and I was like, oh God, it smells like home. Like, you don't think that, but you can tell out of a lineup, you're like, sunshine, this is it. This is the one. So, and I talked about it way too long, but like I said, I'm going to be the one to put your neighborhoods on my wine list. So tell us about your winery. Tell us Kanzler Family Vineyard. How long has it been around? Like, seems like everybody's involved.
So my parents bought a piece of property in 92, built a house that my sister and I grew up in. Their first attempt at farming was about 3 acres of raspberries. I don't know what kind of harebrained idea that was of my dad's. I don't know if he thought my sister and I were going to have a farm stand at the top of the road for like the 2 cars an hour that drive by. So that lasted a very brief amount of time. But yeah, they had 20 acres and they built a house with some landscaping, and the rest was just a decrepit, non-producing, you know, you couldn't pay someone to take the apples for you, apple orchard. And so after the raspberry, I won't call it a debacle, after the raspberry experiment, my dad did a much smarter thing, which was knock on the neighbor's door. And our neighbor that we share a property line with just to the south of us is the Kozlowski family. And they're like I don't know, third or fourth generation Sonoma County farmers. They do grapes, they do apples. They had a whole like specialty foods line, jams, chutneys, have a huge pie business. So like a more like diversified kind of farming and farm product line. And Perry, who's living up there, and now Perry still lives there, and his son Tyler and his family do. Perry Kozlowski, at that time an apple farmer, told my dad, you can plant apples in like 47 states in this country. You can grow wine grapes in a few places in the world. If I were you, I would plant grapes. And so my dad took that advice and ran with it. Funny story that ties that off is about probably like 4 years ago now, Perry tore out half of his Gravensteins across the way there and planted Pinot Noir and said, should have taken my own damn advice 20 years ago when I told your dad to plant. But anyway, so we started as farmers first, and they started developing the vineyard in about 96, and they sold the fruit exclusively. So we were just grape growers, you know, selling fruit to other wineries. We actually sold to Gary Farrell, I think, for 1 year there in like the early aughts. And we sold fruit 1 year to Flowers, actually, but I think it was after Greg was out of Flowers. I think Ross Cobb was at Flowers at that time. So, you know, we were kind of finding our way in the grower winery world. And then a couple cool things happened, you know, for my parents. One is they started making their own wine in 2004. And in 2002, we hooked up with this winery called Costa Brown, which, you know, was part of that kind of early mid 2000s meteoric rise of New World Pinot Noir. You know, some people call it the sideways effect. You know, Costa Brown and a lot of other wineries in our neck of the woods, you know, really all up and down coastal California, but definitely a big bullseye on Sonoma County, Santa Lucia Highlands, Santa Rita Hills, a little bit more if you're going to talk about the sideways effect. We don't talk about Oregon, right? There, you know, there are different people. No, just kidding. But there was definitely the kind of mid to early 2000s was a big uptick in interest, and then consequently a big uptick in plantings, bottling, single vineyard bottlings, all that good stuff. And so we were able to kind of find a niche in that growth market and start to make our own wine. That being said, we still, you know, to this day in 2021, we make less than 2,000 cases. The entire company is, you know, my parents, my wife, myself, and we have 5 full-time employees now, and that includes like a farm stay and property manager. So we're super duper small, working mostly with estate fruit. If you pull up that bottle, and I have it right here, all 4 vineyards that we work with are on the back of this bottle. This is the Russian River Valley. So it's a blend of 4 different vineyards, but 3 out of these 4 are in Sebastopol Hills. And then we flesh it out one. Walker Station is our estate in Green Valley, really near the Hallberg Ranch. So if Sebastopol Hills were its own AVA, this would be really close to an AVA wine. It's about 82% Sebastopol Hills. Sorry, 81% Sebastopol Hills and like 19% Green Valley. And that's how we kind of like to keep the character of this wine. So that's kind of the quick snapshot of the family business. And then this wine in particular and how it fits into sort of the rest of the neighborhoods.
So this is Sebastopol Hills.
Correct. Yeah. So let me share my screen again here. And I'm hoping you guys can see this map. So this is off a site called Every Vine, which I recommend all the corp dorks out there use. This is a crowdsourced site that just kind of shows vineyards. So all these yellow, I lost something here. I'm sorry. I lost my map. Well, let me see if I can get that back up. You know, what I like to kind of show with Every Vine is the density of plantings and, you know, just what goes on in the greater Russian River Valley, specifically some of the more established areas like Santa Rosa Plains, Green Valley, and kind of some of the northern more parts of the AVA, because you see more of a history of grape growing there, and that's reflected in the density of the plantings. Sebastopol Hills is a little bit more of a Wild West, at least historically. You know, going back 20 years now, there's been more density of plantings there, but it was definitely an area where, you know, probably somebody like Andre in his day would be like, you're not growing grapes out there, like forget about it. That's apple country or that's grazing land. You know, it's cold out there. There's greener pastures. You know, if Rocchioli Vineyard is a bullseye, start working out in concentric circles from there. And Sebastopol Hills is like way out there. I kind of consider, you know, Rocchioli and that stretch of the middle reach there of the Russian River kind of like the bullseye for West County and Russian River Pinot Noir. And so we're a couple circles out there, but in the long run, you know, it's proven that these kind of cooler areas have been really friendly for Pinot Noir. And to me, it makes a little bit, okay, I think I got it back here. So what I like to show with this, Kanzler Estate is right here. There's Kandler Vineyard. So all of this, if you guys can follow my cursor kind of around the town of Grayton, this is like Green Valley, and this is Santa Rosa Plains up here, and all these yellow boxes are plantings. You come southwest of us, all this brown, this is the Petaluma Gap, and this is grazing land. So if you go north and west from the Sebastopol Hills, you're growing grapes forever. You're in Greater Russian River Valley, you get up into Alexander, Dry Creek, North Napa Valley, all that. You go south and west of us, and you're kind of out of room. This is cold, this is windswept, this is fog influence.
Wow.
And you really have to go east. So like this is the 101 corridor, and if you go east and farther away from the ocean, you can grow grapes that far south. But you got to get away from the coast if you're that far south, because that's where all the prevailing wind and fog and weather are coming from. So stylistically, you know, I think there's a lot in common between Sebastopol Hills and Green Valley. As far as the fruit profile goes, it can be a little bit more red fruited. There's definitely like a rustic or like Farrell character, I think, in Sebastopol Hills wines that are reflected in, you know, more of a windswept environment, thicker skins. There's some density and some chunkiness to the wines, whereas I think some sites in the warmer parts of Russian River tend to be that classic, really plush, almost like creamy, you know, velvety Russian River character. This is a little bit more like rustic, you know. If Middle Reach is filet mignon, this is maybe a little more New York strip. There's a little fat on this, a little bit more of a gamey character to it. We don't have like that pure butteriness of some of the other areas. But to me, it makes the wine a little bit food friendly, and it makes the wine really age worthy. You know, we have a tannin structure that really clamps these wines down on your palate and makes them really food friendly. So that's generally what I look for out of this neighborhood. And you know, to come full circle, a little bit later ripening, which with a brand new baby on the way, if we don't pick grapes for 3-4 weeks, I'd be a happy camper.
And so you share when you say that, you know, you have a lot in common with Green Valley. You also have gold rich soil in common. You have gold rich soil where you are as well, right? And so
yeah, 100%.
So Sebastopol Hills is east to west around Sebastopol, correct? West to east, all the way
not
around.
even really. I'd say if you're east of the town of Sebastopol, you're getting into maybe like a southern Santa Rosa Plains area. It's definitely south and west of Sebastopol.
What
Greg's
in the world? What is that, Greg?
Area? I don't know what's going on.
It's a red-tailed hawk, and it's almost directly above my head right now.
I feel like that's auspicious, as long as it doesn't come in for you.
Well, I was after a goldfinch a little bit ago, but it's still up there. There it goes. It's flying away. Wow.
Steer towards the gopher holes, Greg.
That's right. See, people think when they think wine country, they think of like, oh, it's going to be this like big palatial estates. And at least I did. And I was like, what is that noise? They're like, oh, that's coyote mating season. And I was like, not really. They're like, no, really. And also you might want to put boots on because there's snakes all around here. And I was like, what? And then there was a pregnant scorpion in front of my door. And I was like, where am I? And they're like, you're in wine country. I don't know what I thought was happening, but when I literally saw that there are chicken hawks, I thought it was a cartoon. There's chicken hawks, and foxes really do get in hen houses. And I was like, oh my God, I thought this was a joke. And everyone's like, this is what happens when people come here. Y'all don't know anything. So
it is ag at the end of the day. We are an agricultural industry.
Absolutely. And it all goes back to farming. Harvest.
Greg's got his signature like Carhartt overalls on, I can tell.
I love it. I love it. It makes me super happy. So Sebastopol Hills neighborhood, and you are a part of this. I know that. Thanks for bringing up all the schematics. I had no idea like that level of green and then totally brown is. And the thing is, you can and mountain lions in the Santa Rita Hills, says Doug Rutherford. Ooh, how about that? Got it. We have a question, if I can ask this, and then I want to talk about I don't want to forget about talking about your wine because it's delicious. But we have a question, and maybe you guys can answer it. What has been the effect on the tannin structure? What is cold soak, extended maceration, and whole cluster with whole cluster crushing? Has it changed substantially? Talking about the effect on the tannin structure. Do you think that tannin structure has changed dramatically in the past few
I think
days?
that was a question for Nancy.
Yeah, so
it says
the way that
panelists.
Teresa, my almost PhD winemaker, explains it is that the extended maceration actually creates longer tannin chains, which softens out the wine. So it doesn't make, I thought when she told me she wanted to do extended maceration, I was not really excited because I thought that it was going to make this big over extracted in your face style. But that's not what happens. It sort of creates that steeping, savory secondary characteristic and softer tannins. But Greg, I'm sure, probably has things to add. Greg always has something to add. By the way, I did see a note here about Greg and the LaFollette wines. And just to add on to what Alex said, Greg and I created a brand together, LaFollette. So it's a half a degree of separation in this valley.
Well, Greg, somebody wants to know what happened to that brand.
Well, it's there's no longer a LaFollette in LaFollette brand. I haven't been making wine there for about six years now. So it still has my name, but I moved on to other things.
Good.
Yeah. And if anyone's interested in extended maceration and cold soak, I actually did part of my postgraduate thesis on that. And there is an article out there called Extended Maceration, What Price Glory? And it was in the Napa Valley College winemaking syllabus.
Really?
Might still be in that, yeah. So, but that's a really long discussion. But
I will read every word.
Okay.
What price glory? Oh my gosh, that could not be a better subtitle.
Yeah, what price glory? Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So let's talk about this wine really fast because we didn't finish talking about it. I can't believe how different the wines are on the nose, and yet every one of them is, you say rustic? Alex, I don't get rusticity on this. Like this isn't like a Côte d'Aron. That this is beautiful and elegant and lovely and elevated, and the nose on all of these is fantastic. And we have two 17s and a 19, and they all share that a core of fruit, but literally wrapped in like velvet and steel at the same time. It's like,
love that.
When people think, Russian River Valley, a lot of times, like, we're saying, oh, plush. And even when you said Eastern Hills, it's warmer there. There's not this, like, it's not overly fruit driven. There is beautiful fruit here, 100%. And that's what draws you in. And then it changes and it gets more complex. It's like someone that you're like, oh, they're pretty. And then they start talking about the books that they've read. And you're like, I also love that book by Khalil Gibran. That's what the wines are doing.
Nice. I think it's important to remember, the Neighborhoods Initiative is a tool to kind of explore Russian River Valley, but we are all still Russian River Valley. So I think there is a thread that winds its way through all these wines and the wineries and the vineyards. And I think that we're all kind of striving for that. Terroir is taste of place, right? So like, I'm not trying to make Burgundy. I love Burgundy. If I want to drink Burgundy, I'm going to buy Burgundy. Like, I don't think it suits us to kind of emulate anybody else. And so that carries over to Russian River. We're all trying to make Russian River wines, but I think we all also agree, and I'm sure some of our attendees are in this boat as well. Like, Pinot Noir is such a heady wine, and the people who are into Pinot Noir love to split hairs. They love to talk about nuance. I mean, the wine itself is all about like nuance and like the ethereal characteristics of wine, and a small change having a really big difference. And so the Neighborhoods Initiative is a vessel for that. And it's also, I think, a nice way to characterize the wines in kind of, smaller than the AVA, but bigger than a vineyard designate. Right now you see a lot of wines labeled Russian River Valley, and you kind of know that's a blend, and it could be a 50K SKU and it could be a 500,000K SKU, or you have the vineyard designate wines, and they can kind of vary in their production as well, but it's from one little area. So the neighborhoods to me are a way to kind of focus on a specific area of Russian River Valley without having to get super granular like a vineyard designate, or just being super broad like the AVA wine is. So it serves a lot of purposes, but yeah, at the end of the day, nobody's talking about officially chopping up this AVA into sub AVAs or smaller AVAs. It's just kind of a method to explore, and I think that's how we want to keep it.
And I think that's the strength of the whole thing, is that you're saying there are differences, but we're still in this one thing. And so it is communal. It feels very generous, and it feels very generous that there's no defensiveness when you're talking about Eastern Hills being warmer, because you're all part of Russian River Valley, and sometimes you get that with other AVAs. Well, no, it's not, there's just a little bit of defensiveness. They're all trying to like eke out market share. It doesn't feel like that. And that's why I was really excited to do this series, because I didn't know about it. And I was across the mountain, and Sonoma and Napa to me are sisters. And
Yeah.
I've always felt that way. There are certain things that you can do in Sonoma that you cannot do in Napa, and vice versa. And there's a strength in that. And there is a difference. But to say like, this is what's going on, I had no idea. And it makes sense. And it's nice to know that there's science behind it, and that it's not objective. And sometimes wine gets to be too flowery and too, ethereal. And you read these wine descriptions and you're like, oh my gosh, give me a break with this. And to see that there's science behind it is actually kind of the new magic. The magic is that there is a difference, and in one place. And when you think about what happened, what had to happen geologically, like what's going on for that to happen is like, that's also magic. You can't control that. Like you can make decisions, but like, how cool is that? And like you said, it's like a birth certificate. And when you said it was like a lightning clap, Greg, it's the truth. And to have the distinguished professor of viticulture and enology say that is huge. They don't have a dog in the fight, except to be like, wow, this is pretty substantially amazing. And that's how great and how wonderful that that's happening right where you guys are, and right where you farm and work and live. Any closing words?
We live in a place that's incredibly remarkable, and not just because of the rich landscape, but because of the people. We are very collaborative. We work together. We're not, picking after each other. And I've worked all over the world, and this is one place where people really help each other out, and always have, and I think always will.
I think that's, I don't think a lot of people know that, and it's the truth. You ask one person like, oh yeah, we used to share a bottling line, and, they sent their people over, and, you just listen to stories about wineries that all over where the husband died and everyone was like, hey, we're going to bring your fruit in for you and show you how to make wine. We don't think you should sell. What? Like you hear those stories all over in Napa and Sonoma, and I'll tell you what, it makes you really miss it when you're not there, for sure. So my heart is with you guys. I know we're all like bated breath. Everybody's on California side all the time. Happy harvest. So excited to have you. And in closing, I just want to say thank you to Alex Kanzler and to Greg LaFollette and to Nancy Bailey, representing their 3 wineries. This has been absolutely wonderful. I know we're going over time a little bit. These wines are beautiful. They really do speak to a place. And to have complexity, plus you taste sunshine, not ripeness, sunshine. There's difference. And a lot of people think they're the same, and not so in these 3 wines. They're beautiful. And thank you so much for coming and taking the time out of your extraordinarily busy schedules with new babies and harvest, and you've got fruit coming in from everywhere. Thank you very much. It's been lovely to have you.
I'll just say, if y'all keep drinking it, we'll keep making it. So
Yeah.
support your friendly winemakers.
I will. And
I would,
go ahead, Nancy.
I would like to add that I think we've given a little taste of the complexity of the Russian River Valley, and we'd like to invite people to come and visit for themselves, because it truly is a choose your own adventure.
Ooh.
You could have a Sebastopol Hills adventure, you could have an Eastern Hills adventure, a Green Valley adventure, or within the space of 15 miles by 15 miles, you can have a 6 neighborhoods adventure to small wineries and bigger wineries, ones you've never heard of, and the guy is getting off the tractor having wiped his hands and he's pouring you the wine, to ones you might be more familiar with. It's a really amazing place, and it's
Is
all
it
right
really
here.
15 by 15?
Yeah, it's pretty small.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, well, so the Russian River Valley wine growers, I know Jesslyn and the team out there would be glad to set any of that up and to help people. The website for the Russian River Valley wine growers has has the maps and has a lot of the stuff we've talked about today. I know I want to talk about the movie once again. You said that it was, can you say it again, Greg?
It's called Andre, the Voice of Wine.
Andre, the voice of wine, and that's going to be about Andre Telechef, who was so important. Thank you to the viewers that are watching today and those who are going to be watching on YouTube. Really glad to have you. Thanks again, everyone, and drink good wine, come visit, and we'll see you again shortly. Thanks so much, Nancy, Alex, and Greg. Cheers, everybody. Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much.
Jodi.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone at
Bye-bye.
Benchmark.
Bye.
Bye.